Hello and welcome to Multifamily Elevated. My name's Suzanne Hobson, and I am super excited to talk to you about vision, people, and execution, and how you can utilize this information to elevate you and your team and your experience in multifamily. Brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, giving you the latest and greatest news and content across our multifamily sector. So let's jump in. Enjoy this episode of Multifamily Elevated and enjoy the climb.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of Multifamily Elevated. Today, we have my friend, Bob Besse, who is going to tell us a little bit about what it's like in the fractional world of sales. And we're going to deep dive this a little bit. I think he's got some very interesting things to share, and anyone out there listening who is having a sales problem, which quite frankly, we run into all the time, I think we'll find this very informative and also just get to know Bob Besse a bit better. So Bob, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I am a fractional vice president of sales, which means that I work with business owners or presidents of companies when they've got some sort of sales issue or sales problem. By the time they come to me, they got to do something or it's going to just keep getting worse and worse and worse. So I'm brought in to work with them. And I mainly work with companies that are small and medium-sized businesses. That way I can really be one-on-one with the owner or with the president of the company.
Well, what's your background like? How did you get to this point?
Great question. I had spent decades in corporate as a vice president of sales and marketing and really, really love the discipline, putting together teams, hitting sales budgets, and really watching people succeed. We're dealing with the same problems in the same company and the same customers on and on and on. And I wanted to be able to expand that and work with different types of folks, different types of companies. And I'm a member of the REF peer group, which is a professional peer group of small and medium-sized businesses. And that's where I got introduced to a lot of small and medium-sized business owners and would sit down and talk to them over lunches and dinners about their sales problems. And I thought, at this point in my career, I can take what I really love doing with people and the size of companies I enjoy hanging out with and put them together. And that's why I made the leap over here to become an outsourced vice president of sales.
Love it. And Bob, I know we'll dive into this a little bit further. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about you is you look at sales and marketing as a discipline.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it can be this scary thing, especially if it's not in your suite of expertise. Some business owners, they're more inclined to have some sort of sales. So that's probably why they're leading their company. But yet there's some disciplines and, really some experience and knowledge that you talk about in our conversations that I think is really enlightening. So let's dive in and just talk a little bit about what happens when you step into a company as a fractional VP of sales. What are the first signs that you look for that a sales team is underperforming? Like not just the numbers, but in structure or strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I'm brought in, I'll just kind of start at the beginning. An owner is going to be having some sort of problem. And it could be, like you just brought up, hey, sales are stagnant or declining. It may also be on the other end of the spectrum in which a company has grown and scaled so much that their sales processes and infrastructure just haven't caught up, right? They've really gotten over their skis on growth. You may find a situation where you have an owner that is running sales because that's just what he or she has to do, along with the 5 other hats that they're wearing. And they want to get rid of it, or they simply don't have the time to devote to it. Or things may be going well and somebody wants to grow, and they simply don't know where to start on a sales strategy or even the first questions to ask. So those tend to be common issues that I run into when I walk in. Many times there will be some sort of number that is there. We will definitely look at that. But beyond that, what I tend to look at is first, do you have a sales process in place, right? If somebody from a lead all the way through the resolution to this, be it a sale or be it that someone tells you to pound sand, do you have a process in place? And that's something that we're going to look at. Are you measuring along with that? Along that whole thing, there are certain KPIs, key performance indicators, that are important. Are you looking at that? For example, are you looking at the number of calls that might lead to a number of conversations that might lead to something else further down your cycle? So we take a look at that. Besides the KPIs and the goals, and by the way, I'll always ask, does your sales team have goals? You would be surprised how many times the response a lot of times can be something along the line of they know what they need to do, or they should know what they need to do. And I'll always ask, do they know what they need to do? So do we have goals in place? So we look at that. Also goes back to the team. Do you have the the right players in the right seats, doing the right things, the right activities that are going to lead to results that are on there. And then finally, an area that I'll look at beyond the numbers is what is your overall strategy? Do you know who your target market is, and can you describe that to me? What's your ideal customer profile look like? Who are the types of buyers that you're dealing with? Because everybody's got a different agenda when they're going to be purchasing something from you. Are you in a market itself that is growing or stagnant or declining? And you'd be surprised, just with a few questions along that, I can usually figure out where I need to focus and where I need to concentrate.
Wow, that's great. And this really does apply to multifamily. You're talking the same language that we often talk about, which is process and metrics and strategy. And usually one of those things, if there's trouble on an asset, that's exactly what's occurring.
Yep.
So it's great to have that refreshing sort of outside perspective. Sometimes I think we get a little enclosed in our own industry and we don't realize that some of these patterns are really in every industry, right? So, yeah. And you mentioned something about market, and you mentioned something about, the metrics. Let's talk about leads, because I think, oftentimes companies believe that they just need more leads to be successful. From your experience, what is really the largest misconception about that in driving sustainable growth?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Leads are usually something that someone will lock on to, right? That if we could just get more people coming in the door or calling us or hitting the website, whatever it might be, all of our problems would be solved. And hey, there are cases where that is absolutely true. Usually, though, when that's a problem that's presented to me, I'll start to figure out what have you been doing to try to drive the leads. And usually some really good things that have worked. And I'll say, well, if you're doing all of this, there's something further down. So beyond the leads, what you're really looking at is, so what happens? The lead comes in. Where does it go? Who's handling it? How is it being qualified? Who is having that discussion? Does that person know the questions to ask to really take somebody down through the process to get them to a decision point? Because if it is just leads and you increase that, but you haven't corrected anything in the sales process, which is usually where you can find the problem, you can just flood your funnel or your pipeline with leads, and somewhere it's going to get stuck. And that's what we want to look at. Where is it getting stuck? Where are people coming in and then they're stopping, they're not going any further in terms of a prospect, and how can we work with somebody to work through that? Which again may revolve around training, might revolve around the process that's in place. Maybe that it's the person itself, that he or she just isn't the right individual to do that, which can happen. You can have some really great people that in where they fall in a sales process may not be the best place for them. That's just not in their wheelhouse. They don't have a desire and they don't want to get better at doing that.
Yeah. And to that point, I'd love to hear some more of your brilliance around marketing and sales and some of the handoffs or differentiating factors. I think sometimes they get a little muddled, and I'm really curious about what your belief is around that. Like, how do the two play together, and how are they really integrated?
Yeah, marketing and sales have got to work together. It is absolutely critical. And as you had mentioned, these are two very strong disciplines, right? There is a science and there is a process that goes into both. And the way that they work together, since I have actually started off in marketing in my career, and then went into sales, so I've got a very good perspective on how to put them together. What I tend to look at is there's a portion of marketing called performance marketing. In a broad sense, this is how can we get things out there to bring people through the door, to make a handoff to somebody that can then take that individual and find out if we can close them or not. So what I tend to do, one trick of the trade is, if we are trying to create, let's say, a lead generation campaign, which you had talked about. So what is it that we need in terms of a lead? What does the ideal customer profile look like? Who is it we're going after? And how do they need to be qualified? And having that discussion between sales and marketing, put the same folks on the same team call in the same room and go, look, what if we said a good lead marketing for you to get the check mark is that the sales person that you did the handoff with, right? An agent, whoever it might be, goes, yes, that is a good lead. Then you want to know, how do we qualify you? What do I have to look for? Because further up in our messaging and marketing, we are going to make sure that we've got that in there. By the same token, if somebody that is on the sales side goes, all marketing ever does is give us junk leads, and all they're ever doing is this,
Happens.
awareness stuff. And, how's that supposed to sell, right? Have the conversation. What do you mean by that? And again, having been firmly planted in both camps, this is where I can go, all right, what do you mean by that? What is it that you need? What makes a good qualified lead for you on the sales side of it? Marketing, how do we go about doing that? Because someone in marketing is going, now, wait a minute. I went right down that checklist that you asked for, and we provided it to you. The response is, you got what you wanted. That excuse is closed on the sales side. Now let's talk about that process, right? So what are you doing? You can't now go back and say, well, I'm just getting junk, right? I am getting good stuff. And then there's something in the rest of the process on that. By the way, it is in that rest of the process that if you've got a sales and marketing group that are working really well together, this is where marketing can come in and say, hey, based on the content you're going to be talking to somebody about, based on the stories you're going to be telling in the sales process, we can help you with that. We can make sure that we've got people primed to have those conversations in our messaging, so we are very, very consistent with it. And that's one of the things I help companies try to figure out.
That's awesome. Because I've seen the divide. I've seen where it has been a push and pull, and there's not this really working together. And I understand as well how critical it is that is just one well-oiled machine from start to finish. The level of communication I would imagine has to be just top notch.
It does. I mean, you've got to have people working together. And it was interesting. I was still in corporate when COVID hit, and we all went into Teams meetings. And I had been working with my sales and marketing team in the organization I was with, trying to get them to work together. But there was disagreements, as you can imagine, in terms of how we go to market, how we get the word out to our customers. With COVID and everybody working from home in 2020 and the first part of 2021, that was when in that company, sales and marketing really came together. Because it was that they were in the lifeboat together. They were both trying to just get people to reach out, talk with us, have conversations. And some of the best discussions we had online were, how do we go about doing this? What works? And I will never forget that the marketing team had been pushing, for example, webinars and some other things. Sales team had been opposed to it. We couldn't do trade shows. And we ended up doing a webinar, brought in hundreds of people into there because they were sitting at home, and we were able to grab them. It was great. And the follow-up from the sales group was really, really good because we qualified who we wanted, had the content we wanted, and had a plan for the follow-up on this webinar. And we looked at it, and when we all got back into the office, the marketing team was like, you realize we are spending tens of thousands of dollars on trade shows, and you guys are sitting there for days. And in the course of 1 hour, for a fraction of that cost on a webinar, look at what you got to be able to work off of. And the sales team was going, honestly, I'd rather be hanging out on a webinar and following up than spending days on end at a show where I am on the floor and I'm not able to go do other work. So there was a good example of sales and marketing working together. But as a leader, you've really got to push that and have the vision that it is two sides of the coin. Guys, we've got to work together on the leads, and we got to work together on the messaging once somebody is into the real sales and closing part of the funnel.
Yeah, and just coming back off of one of our largest industry trade shows, there has been a lot of chatter on LinkedIn about, how much of this is a waste of time. And there's varying degrees of it, or willingness to talk about it truthfully out into the open. But there is some, I guess, regret, or, like, this isn't the best use of our time. Like, if we could really, utilize this time to in a smaller crowd, a smaller group, build more connected relationships with people. I hear that, like, they don't even get a chance on the trade show floor to build good relationships. And so, it's really not worth the huge dollars in the end.
And everybody has a different thought on trade shows. What I have found, and I work primarily in B2B, is that if you can find the right show, and many times it's something that's smaller, it's more niche than some of these larger ones, where you can get that one-on-one time. Or what I always advise my clients on is, if you're going to do a show, first go walk it, find out who is there, have a plan going in terms of who you want to talk to if you actually know who's going to be there. Because a great strategy is, we're not going to put a booth on the floor, but I am going to go because I've got a lot of prospects and customers here. I'm going to purposely reach out to them and try to meet them. For example, I may be taking everybody to Topgolf, and if I can get 10, 20, 30 people there. They're already going to be there. I'll cover the cost of it. I can have them for an hour, hour and a half, really connect, know that I'm going to follow up with them. There's a value to that versus I then spent 2.5, 3 days sitting in a booth for 6 to 8 hours a day with a ton of leads, of which probably 10 to 15% are going to be worth anything when it's all said and done. Hope to God we're going to follow up on them versus something that's much more tight and structured on it. So again, the right show with the right audience is great, but boy, if you ask the question, I will give you the same amount of money we spent at that trade show to generate business. Would you go back or would you take that budget and spend it someplace else? I'll give it to you. When I ask that question of clients, a lot of times it's, you know what? I think I'd spend it someplace else. There's your answer. There's your answer. Now let's go try that and see what happens. Because you got a baseline off the show to see what happens versus the next idea.
That's true. That's true. And, again, I think for brand awareness or, for startups, I think, it can be a good move. I don't know. It can be overwhelming too for the customer. It's just, there's a lot to look at and to really get into a meaningful conversation and leave that sort of onto the customer is probably not the right way to go. We could talk all day about trade shows and their effectiveness, and I don't want to get into the mix of that because I do love them. I love going to them and I love seeing everybody. It's just, you're right. Like, where do we put the money? So let's switch gears just a tad because I'd love to talk. We always talk about this, you and I, technology and how it's affecting things right now. What role do you think technology is playing with, the CRM and really optimizing the modern sales leadership role? And how do you help companies avoid the trap of the next shiny penny, too much tech in the tech stack? Yeah. So how are you dealing with tech in general?
Well, it's interesting because when I work with clients or prospects, they can be all over that board in terms of where they are with technology. You brought up CRM. That is a number one, the table stakes to playing in modern sales management. So anybody listening, if you are running a sales organization and you do not have some sort of CRM system in place that you and your team are using, that is step one. You are spending an inordinate amount of time trying to run your team when you have a tool at your disposal that really help you and help your team. So on CRM, let's say you want to implement this. The good news is, you and I can still remember when a CRM implementation was this huge undertaking that had to happen, and the expense and the work and all of that. There's so many options that are out there today for small and medium-sized businesses to be able to implement either on your own or with somebody that will help you, that are subscription-based, right? That you're able to go out there and use this, and it's based on the number of users you have, and they're easy to modify because they're aimed at people that want to be able to grab this and run with it. A CRM does a couple of things for you if you've never had one. One, it gets all your contacts in one place. Why does that matter? One of the most important things you have as an asset in a company are the people that you are talking to, both as prospects, folks, and potential customers, and people at clients. You need to have that information. Years ago, I walked into a company. They did not have a CRM. Their sales team, most of it had left before I walked in and took every customer contact with them. They were selling to people and didn't know who they were talking to. They did not know who that was, and the CRM is able to help. Second, allows you to put a sales pipeline or a funnel in so you can see the steps along the way. And the third, based on that, can give you a snapshot of where your forecasting is. So if you don't have a CRM, do it. Now let's move beyond that. Oh, the shiny stuff, right? And right now, it is all about AI and where it's going. Tend to talk to customers and people about their customers and the folks that I'm speaking with is, look, if you are looking at AI in sales, 3 areas to start with. One, keep in mind that AI is a tremendous time savings for you. So if you were going to go out and talk to a prospect, for example, and you want to learn about their industry and their company, think about how you're going to do this. One, you may have a salesperson say, I'm going to take the next 2 hours, block off my calendar, and go down a bunch of Google rabbit trails on this one. Or I can use Chat or Gemini or Copilot, and in 10, 15 minutes, have that information and a lot more put together in terms of that customer, that prospect, whatever it is, and what their industry is. So I just freed up an hour and 45 minutes of my day. What is the one thing that salespeople will say they never have enough of? Time. I don't have time. I can't do it. I do it, but I can't do it. AI allows you to get to a point in a process that you would get to on your own eventually, but you can just jumpstart this. Another good example is if you're going to be writing a proposal, if you are trying to write an email, the AI that is out there, right? You can use chat or any of the most common stuff to be able to help you put that together and do it very, very quickly. So you have that. Second thing, if you don't already have one, is get a note taker. The note takers are great, not only on Teams, but if you're having a conversation face to face with somebody, it can help grab what you talked about and be able to summarize it at the end of it. So you can see what the key points are. Could you do this on your own? Can you be writing it down? Absolutely. But here's a way of you staying present in the meeting while somebody else, the AI agent, is taking the notes for you. And there's plenty of them out there, and it's ever evolving. And the third place that I find that AI is really good is if you are working and you are doing prospecting off of LinkedIn. LinkedIn has some good tools, and there are others such as KnowledgeNet or Apollo that you can use to really enhance what you do. I know that's one of the things I do on business development when we're just trying to find people to have a conversation with, because if you can get somebody that isn't a LinkedIn user, you've got a great social platform to get your blogs, your other information out there, and start a connection to start a conversation with it. So I urge folks to not just run after the latest shiny thing, but really think about what is it we're trying to accomplish. CRM is going to help you run the business. Some of these AI tools can let you do things you're already doing, but do it a heck of a lot faster. If you did nothing else but that, your business is going to jump.
I love it. I love it. And yes, you're right. There are a lot of tools, and some of them are very inexpensive or part of your current, suite. And so, yeah, it's upfront for people because everybody else is doing it too. And so your competitors are, they're surging ahead because they are really grasping onto the right technologies to do things faster. In all of this, the other thing we've talked about before, you and I, is, the ability to really connect. And I think what's really up for people out in the world right now is if you're using AI and you're using it in your message, you're using it for business development, how do you really personalize it and make sure that it's sending the right message? Because sometimes companies that you might hire to do that for you might not do it correctly, and it could really be a detriment to your business, right? So how do you really vet, how to do that, or the right company to partner with when you're looking at maybe getting some help on the business development side and generating those leads with communication and content?
That's a really good point. That's an excellent point. So I tend to look at AI that this will get me 80 to 90% of the way there in terms of what we're doing. I still want to review what the messaging looks like. Now, over time, as that is reviewed and it's changed, the agent, if there is one that you're using, can then help it adapt to what you are talking about and get closer and closer on their first draft. So think of AI as I've got a really smart and quick intern working for me, and she or he is going to bring this to me, and I'm going to look at it. Would you let an intern say, I got the email campaign, don't worry about it, or I've got a business development outreach, don't worry, I'll send it out? You go, no, you won't. There's no way I'm going to let you. I want to see what you had and how close are you and how can we iterate and get you closer and closer each time through. So if you are hiring somebody out, it's a great way of jump starting where they are. You're going to be able to get that first draft much quicker, and subsequent is going to be better. You still want to review this, because you'd come to a client and say, here's what we talked about. Here's a pass at it. How does this sound? Does this work, and is this accurate? I will use, with a company I work with, AI when we're developing sales playbooks for somebody, right? We can take some good information. And what a playbook is a lot of things that everybody has in an organization that has about their customers, their markets, their products, how we answer objections, but it hasn't been centralized into one place. And I will work with organizations, do a download, get the stuff they work with this organization, and we'll get a draft of a playbook. And it's about, first time through, 80%, 85% of the way there. And that's like, all right, not quite accurate. Let's tweak this. Hey, there's some things we missed. We want to add it to the book. Here's how we'd like to say it. Great. But it's a huge time savings up front in terms of what goes into it. So work with it, but then you've got to be the human that's reviewing it along the way.
Love it. That was a great answer. To that end, it looks like we're almost at time, and I have another question, and then we'll wrap things up. So for founders and CEOs considering fractional leadership, like what we both offer, how can fractional VP of sales bring immediate value? Like, what's the quick win, and what's the key difference between hiring a fractional leader and then, versus a full-time sales exec?
Well, another good question. It is in the name, fractional. So this means I would be coming in part-time in terms of this. So a small, medium-sized business is going to be sitting there, and what they are looking for is the expertise, it is the experience, it is the background and depth that somebody is coming in that has got years of experience being a VP of sales and marketing. The problem is you can't afford that, right? So I know what I need, but what I can afford is somebody that's not going to bring all of this to the table. How do I resolve that? Particularly if you've got issues you're trying to solve on sales, on growth, or on strategy. So that is where I will come in to play on it. And you're right, you walk in and you're looking for a quick win. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? I will typically, when I'm meeting with an owner or a founder over coffee, want to find out what their end game is. Is their end game that you're trying to grow the company? Is the end game that I want to stabilize what I've got and just do that? Is the end game, look, we're trying to prep for an exit in 2 to 3 years, and I got to get this thing in the right place to be able to do that down the road. And that's different than just, keep on keeping on type of thing. Once I start with the end in mind, then you are looking for the really quick hits up front. Some of the places that we'll look at, I've touched on. Do you have the metrics in place to measure what you need? Do you have a sales process? Do you have goals? And does your sales team know what it takes to succeed? If I looked at you and said, hey, if I looked at anybody, what does it take to get an A? How many points out of 100 does it take to get an A in a class? Everyone would go 90. We all know what 90 puts an A on the report card, right? What does it take for your sales team to get an A? I've never looked at it that way. I don't know. So it's that type of question that I have. I said, if you don't know, if they don't know, how can you be frustrated? You can be frustrated, but you understand you've got to make sure you're clear with it. So make sure the goals are clear. I will then look at the team itself. Sometimes the team that got you to where you are, with training, with coaching, can be the team to keep you going. Or it may not be, that it's simply you've reached a point in your organization that you've got to really rethink how you're going forward with it. And if all of that is clicking for them, I'll get into the strategy. Are you in the right place? Are you growing in the right spot with the products you have? Are there other markets that are similar you can go into? Or with the current customer base you have, do you have products that you could drive down into them? What does that mean for your sales team? Do you have hunters? Do you have farmers? All those types of questions. So that'll tend to be where I look at it. All of those can lead to some very quick results, right? We can hit some of those things, get the pieces in place. And then long term is where the strategy does come in. Let's take a look at the big picture of where you want to go and how do we do that. Identify your ideal customer profile, your buyer persona, how you stack up versus the competitors. What's your value statement? And what is your plan this quarter and this year going into next year to grow the company?
Love it. Well, I know you're really familiar with business operating systems, and at Here to Elevate, we talk about them all the time and the importance of them. And this is a huge part of what we look at. And you really hit on some excellent points and gave a lot of great nuggets here, Bob, in just a very short amount of time, which I want to thank you for, because there are some people that think they're on the right track, and maybe they are, but these are really good reminders for even, the person that thinks they've got their sales team together in the right way. There's just some things that you hit that I think will really resonate with our listeners. So on that note, if people want to get a hold of you, Bob, and talk more about this or engage, in services, how do they find you?
Two things. One is go to LinkedIn, find my profile there, and just let's do it that way. We can connect on LinkedIn and keep that. Or you can just email me directly. If you got a question, it's like, well, this was great. Let me do it. It's BBE at salesxceleration.com. Besse at salesxceleration.com. Or find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I know we can find you there. Thanks again, Bob, for joining us today. Really appreciate just spending time with you. It's always fun. And really, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Multifamily Elevated, where we hope that you are inspired and ready to go, elevated to take on your next challenge in multifamily. So if you liked this episode, please subscribe, like, comment, and of course, share with your network. And don't forget that this was brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, that is also sharing the latest and greatest in trends, ideas, and content across our multifamily space. Until next time, keep elevating, and we'll talk soon.